1979, I had the opportunity to go across the country, and I went to Toronto, Winnipeg, Edmonton, Fort McMurray, Yellowknife, and Vancouver. And the sole purpose of the trip was to go to see the efforts that were being made in those cities at that time to welcome and help settle the Vietnamese refugees. And it was one of the most remarkable experiences I've had in my life to see. It said a lot about them, and it said a lot about us, because it said a lot about them because they were people who had had unspeakable experiences in their lives very recently, having been in some cases in refugee camps for some lengthy period of time. It said a lot about us because in all of these places across the country at that time, people got together just as is being talked about today and just as has been described, and they got together as a community. It wasn't really about what the government was doing. The government took the step, as it has today, of saying that we're going to have a certain number of these refugees welcomed into Canada, and then the community took over. And the community in the broadest sense of the word, church groups and individuals and families and social service agencies like Costi and so on. And I've had the good fortune during the most recent election campaign to go to an event in the Vietnamese community and meet people, some of whom even said they had met me before during this time back in 1979, but I heard the stories that were very similar to what Wendy described in terms of how well these people have done and what a contribution they have made and continue to make, and their children and grandchildren to this country. And so to me, this is not only what we're about, but it's what we can do and have proven we can do before, and it's being done the right way, where it's a community-based thing that is going to rely on the resources of all the people here and many others to make this happen. And so I would just like to see a repeat, and when I hear the question asked as to whether this is happening in other cities, and here not really as yet, I would simply say to my colleagues who I spent some time with last week, it would have been better if I could be going to see them now, but I was with them in Edmonton last week, and I would say, just in no particular order to single people out, Jim Watson in Ottawa, and Don Iveson in Edmonton, and Naheed Nenshi in Calgary, and Gregor Robertson in Vancouver, just to start with some of the bigger cities that I visited and saw the magic of 1979, 80, and that period with the Vietnamese refugees. Let's show that we can do this again for the Syrian refugees, and Toronto is leading the way, as it often does, thanks to people like Ratna and all the people up here. And I would just hope as the mayor that I can lend a helping hand to that, and that those other mayors will respond in kind, and we might see press conferences being held sometime in, I would say the next 4 weeks, because that would give them time to get organized like this, and show that we can have that total looked after in no time by the generosity of those people in those cities. Thank you.
Mayor Tory, can you just tell us, give us some details about the family that you yourself are sponsoring?
Well, I'm part of a group, first of all, and I'll just tell you the history of that as well, because it indicates the kind of positive spirit that I think is happening in our city, and I'm just trying to make sure that by speaking out about this again today, that we get more and more of that going on. I received an email from a friend on Sunday, and it said they were forming a small group of people, as you can do. And I think a lot of people ask the question, is it okay to form a group of just people? Like, they're not in an organization, they're not incorporated, they're not a church group, they're just a group of people who want to help. And the answer is yes. And I got an email from a friend who said, would I join such a group and provide financial support to make up the $27,000 that is the minimum that's required to help settle a group of refugees here? And I said, yes, I would. So I'm part of a group that's going to do that. And it was explained to me, and I knew it already, and I would mention it to the people. When you do that, of course, the money is a necessary element to make sure that settlement can happen successfully. But we've all sort of been in communication with each other in this group to agree that there are many other things we're going to do. One person, for example, has already volunteered they can make available some furniture that they have, and it's going to sit and be stored until such time as this family that we end up sponsoring, and I don't know who they are at this moment, gets here. But then there will be some furniture. And of course, there are many other things like that, including a moral responsibility, if not more, that you have to help them find some work and generally get settled here in Toronto. And so it's the kind of thing I would have done as a private citizen in any event. I happen now to be the mayor. I was asked about this matter yesterday and just mentioned it to a journalist, but it's the kind of thing where I just would have done it anyway, because I think that's what we're about here. It's what I'm about. It's what I've always been about.
Note that the majority of the refugees who will be admitted to Canada by the end of the year are actually privately sponsored refugees, in which case the housing arrangements and help with employment and so on will by and large be provided by a lot of church groups and other nonprofit groups and by individuals. I have sponsored with my family an entire Syrian family to come. We started off just making a contribution, and now we're up to a whole family, and I'm excited about that, and I'm excited about helping them find a place to live and all those kinds of.
This year you announced that you would be helping to privately sponsor a Syrian refugee. Where does that refugee family, where does that stand?
Well, I'm interested to tell you about that because my family is sponsoring an entire family. We've done that, and we heard just the other day that the family has been identified. We're part of a group of people, but we've put up enough ourselves to sponsor an entire family, and it's 4 children and 2 parents, and they're coming from a place where they are in Turkey now, having fled Syria, where there are 90,000 people normally in this place. They are in Turkey, but there are presently, in addition to that, 90,000 refugees of which they're a part. We hear they're coming in weeks, but we're not entirely sure of that, and the responsibility now shifts to us beyond the money that we put up to help them find a job, help them find a place to live. And so we, together with the other people that are working with us on this, are preparing to do just that.
Well, good luck with that. I appreciate your time today. Toronto Mayor.
Talk to them and some not. But it was a great Toronto story. And so I just think, Matt, we're going to have to keep working and working and working at this.
Do you worry that the initial enthusiasm could wear off, but once a year is a long time, and after years, people are settled here. They're new Canadians, as the Prime Minister was saying. They're not going to be refugees. They're going to be new Canadians. That initial enthusiasm will welcome them here, but after that, we need to ensure that they continue to feel welcome, that they continue to feel supported. Do you worry about that?
Well, no, not much, because I think, first of all, the private sponsors, people like me and my wife and the group we're part of, I don't think our enthusiasm or interest is going to wane. We're not those kind of people, for one thing, but I just think it's a sort of a moral and other kind of obligation you'll have. I think the feeling of the community generally will remain positive. Look at our past experience, me and Barb and the group we're part of, to get our family, the 2 parents, a job.
What is that? What is that like? Just not as the mayor, but as John Tory's private citizen.
It's like it would be for anybody else. You sort of scratch your head and you say, well, all right, who can we call that's in a business that might be willing to take somebody on? And look, we all know that while we do have unemployment here, there are also jobs in Toronto. Open the newspaper, open the Metropolis or one of the websites. There are jobs, so it's not that hard. And you sort of, when you have a group of 20 people, it's amazing, the degree to which somebody around the table will say, I have an opportunity in the place I know, or my brother does.
What's been, just finally, the most surprising bit of the process for you? Again, not coordinating efforts, but in your own family's work to try and
the amount of detailed responsibilities that are placed on the sponsors. So, for example, it will talk about jobs and housing, which are obviously hugely important, but then it goes through virtually a day-by-day description, so that my recollection of the one that made me smile is on day 2 it says, take your family to Tim Hortons for breakfast. And of course, that's not just about breakfast, it's about starting to experience things as we experience them here. And it goes through from there, and there's all kinds of other examples I could give you.
Something with your refugee family that you sponsored, are they being held up, and do you have a timeline for when they'll arrive, and have you rented an apartment already?
No, I'll tell you exactly what happened. I was part of a group, and we did put enough money in as a family to sponsor an entire family ourselves, but we wanted to be part of a group because in that group setting you can better help the people to find a job and find an apartment and acclimatize themselves to life in the city. So the first family sponsored by that group arrived and actually ended up living in Mississauga because that was where there was an apartment available for them and a job and so on. And we felt, Barb and myself and my mother, who were involved in the sponsorship, and my sister, that it would be better if I could be directly involved in really working closely with a family that lived in Toronto. And so we said we would take the second family. And the second family that is coming has been identified by us because they put in front of you a selection of families, and I don't know how one is expected to pick, but we said, well, this particular one looked fine, and they just haven't arrived yet. And so I can't really speak to the question of they've told us they're coming this spring. Spring is upon us, and so we're hoping they come soon. We're excited about trying to help them and trying to work with them. And just from what I've heard from other people involved in our group that have spent more time than we have working with the family that's in Mississauga, it's a wonderful, enriching, thing to do, and I'm just very much looking forward to involving my own children and my grandchildren in helping these people feel most welcome here. I can't really speak to it. No, because you don't actually. We've actually explored those things, so we've begun to explore that because once we knew that there was a family coming and sort of what they consisted of and so on, we began all of that. But there's no point in having an apartment sort of sitting on standby empty until the people are coming for sure, and they do give you some notice. And we've just been told what happened this spring, and I'm optimistic it will. But I can't speak to whether that was sort of slower or faster than otherwise might have been the case.